Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about how to become part of our little group at officehours.global. If you are already in the meeting in Mukana, then know that you can ask questions, vote on those questions. Your questions and votes drive the entire conversation. First hour is general discussion, things that anything around media or virtual production. The second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about AWS. Just open Q&A, no special guest except for us. There's a lot of people here using it, and so we'll do our best to answer your questions about AWS. Tomorrow we're going to talk about working with clients, and so just what that takes and how to approach it. Friday, we're going to do a breakdown of Tony Mobley's show. A bunch of folks here have kind of stepped up around Tony and built a really cool show inside of AWS, and so we'll be talking about that. And then on Saturday, we've got education at 8 o'clock. We don't stream that, so you have to get here early. 10 o'clock, Nick Justishin will join us again, talking about how to get MetaHuman into Unreal. So that'll be the next step there. At 11 o'clock, we have Project Belfast, which is basically we are taking over a small venue in Belfast, Ireland, or Belfast, it's been incredible. We have people doing one part in the West Indies, one part in Germany, one part in Boston. It's an incredible thing to see. So 11 o'clock, we're going to be doing more of that. And then at noon, we're all cooking again with Damayanti Gajar. It's amazing. I would highly recommend trying it. Go grab a webcam. You don't have to have anything really complicated, and come cook with us or watch. But the cooking is a lot of fun. And the chutney from last week was amazing. Just in case you're wondering, I've made it twice now. Anyway, so check that out. We're going to be doing that each week with Damayanti. All right, let's jump into the questions. First question, Courtney.
All right, first question comes from Vienna in Australia. Can the panelists describe how they keep their audio, video, and power cables tidy?
Go ahead, Chris.
I will admit that there's nothing about my desk that is tidy. It's more of like a lab situation where I'm repatching things all the time. There are ways to make it nice, but it doesn't happen here. I do, however, use a little basket that screws to the bottom of my desk. You get them at IKEA, and you can hang cables up in that, so you're not tripping on them with your feet.
Go ahead, Jeff.
The desk I have has a piece of basically aluminum pegboard across the back, which is a great place to hang things. And then I use sort of three methods for fairly permanent installs: the classic tie wrap or zip tie. For less permanent installs, I use Velcro that goes on cables. And if you don't like the way that Velcro catches on cables, then there is the Gilson Quick Clip, which actually comes off of the cable when you're wrapping cables. That's more for temporary use, wrapping up mic cables for storage.
Go ahead, Ken.
I use, I label everything. That really helps. So thanks to Alex tip on the pre-touch cube, which is my labeler, and then I help to label all my power cords and the power bricks, and so that's the start of my
labeling your power bricks is so the key to the operation. Like, it is so important. You end up otherwise you end up with a box of wall warts that you can't figure out what does this go to. Go ahead, Stuart.
Firstly, cable ties that Jeff showed. Never use them on coaxial or triax cable. You will cause a reflection back down the cable, and on some devices you can burn out the transmitter that's sending the signal. And
I think that depends on the
mainly
tension.
for broadcast, and it's SDI. Yeah, but you don't ever because you're compressing them. That's why you have Velcro, right, and why you have things that stretch. But I'm going to share a secret, and we're just grabbing a prop to explain. Those of you who ride motorbikes will know about turning the throttle to open and close the throttle. That's all you're doing when you're wrapping a cable. You're literally rolling your fingers one way or the other to cable it up. So it's like one way, then the other. Throttle on, throttle off. And that's an easy way of doing it. And there was another point I was going to make, and I can't think of it, so I'll yield my time and we'll go to another answer.
Rupert?
So +1 on the IKEA cable management trays that Chris uses. I use those all the time, and they're really useful. For office and desk types environment, it is important not to go over crazy with trying to manage your cables, because if you do need to swap something out in a hurry or troubleshoot something, you're going to be there for a whole load of time unwrapping it all, trying to put it all back together. There is also the interference stuff that to take into consideration, like Stuart mentioned. If you go bundling all kinds of things tight together, it's more problematic electrically than it is to have stuff kind of loose sometimes. But the other thing to remember is cable safety, strain relief. If you've got stuff plugged into stuff all over the place, coming up over desks and things like that, that's one of the most important things to remember, is to relieve the strain on those, so you're not pulling on connectors or on cameras and stuff like that. So that's a real important part of it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I have a very modular studio, so I can move this desk out of the way. So a lot of cords have to be a little bit longer, and they're always looped at one end of the source if I know that I'm moving it around. But I'm definitely looping it, putting a piece of Velcro. I've also been doing some 3D printing, and I've been 3D printing these really cool cable clips that I can put on the underside of the desk that open up pretty quick.
Next question.
Okay, next question, also from Vienna in Australia. How can I troubleshoot a background buzz in my audio? I use an SM58 going into a 1202, which is a mixer.
Jeff Francis.
So the first thing about troubleshooting is you need to know your entire signal chain, and it helps sometimes, if you can't visualize it in your head, is actually draw out every piece of it. And then if you can find another device that goes through a similar chain cleanly, then you can swap things back and forth. So the question is, first, does any other microphone work through your mixer without a buzz? If it does, you know that the mixer is fine and it's that microphone. So then you can swap the cables between those two microphones. It's much easier to troubleshoot if you have one working chain that you can swap individual pieces in. Don't just try to shotgun and swap in a new microphone, because you could have another bad microphone when you're troubleshooting.
Good. Mickey?
Yeah, I would go through a process of elimination, as Jeff mentioned. Make sure that like you can have a listen to the output of the mixer and see if you hear that buzz there. If you don't, that means the buzz is happening down the line. If you do hear it, that means it's either at the mixer itself or before that. Make sure that all unused channels in that mixer isn't potted up. Fade all of those down so that you're not feeding essentially op amp noise, line noise into the audio chain. And as mentioned, as was talked about in the previous question, neaten your cables, separate your audio cables out from your power lines. Sometimes it can cause induction if they are on top of each other or actually parallel to each other. Check your audio cable, make sure that it's a fully working balanced XLR cable, so that common mode rejection is in action and it's canceling out any noise. And lastly, some lights, especially dimmable ones that use pulse width modulation to get them down to a lower level, can cause hum. So try to switch out lights in your room.
Good. Stuart?
I have two tips. One is work backwards. Unplug everything, listen to the final stage in your chain, and then slowly plug in gear until you get the buzz suddenly appear. That's where your problem will be, and that's one way to narrow it down. The other tip is to come into after hours, and especially on a day where Carl or Mickey are floating around, and access the information and knowledge that's available.
All right. I'm going to bet 9 out of 10 times it's a 1202. Next question.
All right. Next question comes in from Art By Jr. in Cupertino. How do you take a decimator and configure it to convert to 1080p instead of 1080i? Go
ahead, Stuart.
There's actually two answers for this question, and it depends on the age of the decimator. If you have a look on the decimator website, for the older gear, you will find a product manual that has a series of dip switches listed, and you adjust the setting in the dip switches. On all of the new gear, it is a web console, and you'll find the ability to change it in that console.
Next question, George, sorry.
Stuart answered it. Just keep a laptop with the software in it. Easiest way to program your decimators.
Courtney?
There is on the newer decimators, the MDHX, there's an LCD panel, and you go into the menu there, and you set the TP TPU or TPI, I can't remember what they refer to it as, but it's the scaler. So you got to set the scaler's output to 1080p, and it'll show you a choice of things. So you select 1080p, and then you make sure your HDMI output is set to the scaler output instead of the input. So you got to make sure that the input is going into the scaler and the output of the scaler is going to your HDMI output, and you should see the input signal and the output signal listed in the LCD, and you'll know if it's right, if the input and output are what you want them to be.
I've owned probably nearly 100 decimators. I don't even know how to use the web interface. all I know is that little LED. All I know is the little LCD on the front, and I just sit there. So you just page through it. You page through and find everything. I've never actually seen the web interface. I know that other people in my company have. They use it all the time, and I'm always like, eventually I got to learn how to use that. But I just know how to use the LCD. So you just page through to what Courtney said. All right, next question.
All right, next coming in from some guy named Alex L. in Novato, California. Says, I'm looking for a great magnifying glass desk lamp for soldering. Does anyone have a strong preference?
Go ahead, Leo.
So I have this one that I got on Amazon, which I really like. It acts as the magnifying glass and has the LED light ring, and it has the arms to actually hold something in place. So I found it really useful. The only thing is the base of it although it's a metal base, it's not heavy enough. So sometimes you have to put something on it to hold it down. And the nice thing I also like is that the LEDs are controllable in color. Which I find quite useful. So when you're changing between what you're soldering, you actually see the things, see if it's actually connected.
I have to admit, I grew up, my grandfather soldered a lot. He built his own transmitters and everything else. And he had a huge one that I've been trying to find something like what I grew up with. And I just haven't been able to find that big, one that and I think maybe I was much smaller too. So maybe it's not as big as I remember it. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, well, the one also from Amazon, this is slightly bigger. So it has a bigger magnifying, so 5 times magnifying, same LED. But better for this, it's got a better clamp on the bottom. You actually clamp it to your desk. That's one I recommend.
Next, Stuart.
I actually didn't realize you had put lamp in there, because otherwise I was going to say the JCAR website, which is also the same answer for Vienna earlier for her cable ties.
All right. Next question.
Okay, coming to us from Tony Mobley in Newman, Georgia, says, thanks to Leo and After Hours, CWTM was switched from a personal YouTube account to a brand account. Is there a safe way to remove the old account? Yes.
Go ahead, Leo.
Just to go over what we actually did, we went through this website, and there's a demonstration, and I'm going to put the link in Makana, and it gives all the instructions of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And what we actually did is we followed it through with Tony, explained exactly each stage, put it through. Even explaining the stage, and Mickey was watching, when you get to the one page which says delete account, you stare at this for about 5 minutes. You really want me to delete my account? It's just how you have to do it, which is how you set up the move across. So we did that. We left him with the way he had it set up is he had the 2 accounts, one on his own main user, his main Gmail account, etc., and the other one was on a completely different email account. So we left it at the moment with the old one in there. There's no videos on it, there's no anything on there, but it was safer to leave it, because when we went to delete that one, it threw up an error, and I said, do you know what, Tony, let's walk away at the moment, because we've already won. Let's not go too further. It is pretty easy to delete the old ones, but it is a process of watching what you're doing, because it is easy to delete the wrong account, and it's better to be doing it in after hours with other people watching.
Rupert?
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, in doing that, just be cautious that you don't end up deleting the underlying Gmail account, because then you won't be able to back out of it, or you may lock yourself out of other things.
Yep. Jeffrey?
So what I've done with previous accounts is I've taken out all the images and taken out all the text, including the description and everything else, and then say this is an old account, go to the new account. I've left that up for about 3 to 6 months. And then at that 6-month mark, I try to delete it. I do have a couple that haven't deleted, but it's the best way to do that.
Next question.
Okay, this is coming in from Vienna in Australia. Sounds like a bit of a setup. What's the coolest video trick that the panelists can do with their ATEM?
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh.
Now they have the glasses. See, the problem is the glasses have to float. You know, right now the problem is they're frozen. You have to have them just a little bit. They just got to move like just a little bit. One of the recent tricks that a lot of us have gotten into is caching an image in our minis. The mini has a little feature that you can cache whatever's in the program, and then doing an auto from the live video to what you cached. And so this is what that looks like. So that's just and we find it to be relatively humorous, especially if you have to if you add a little to it where you just go see it. It's more fun that way. So anyway, so that's something that we've been doing. I will say that the thing that I have the most fun with is just Mix Effect Pro and how it animates all of my super sources. I'm not really set up for that right now because I just swapped my iPad for something else. And so, but as an iPad, being able to do lots of super sources has been really useful for us. Next question.
All right, coming in from New York City, David Brady says, ATEM Software Control 8.6.2 Media Still Store is no longer showing a thumbnail of the image. Instead, just a dotted orange circle. Is there a better way to manage still images with naming, etc.?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, what it might be is each computer that you run the ATEM software for has its own media library. So that's why you might have using the ATEM software on a different computer. That's why that media library might be showing to be empty.
Go ahead, George.
Can cover part of it, but you just need to make sure you're keeping those files in the same folder. Also, just power cycle the ATEM and they'll load back up once you power cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hope it's not I'm in 861, so I'm not in 862. So I'm hoping that the way I would fix it is probably reinstall 861, see if it occurs. So if you do those other things and those don't work, I'd go back a version. It may be a bug that they introduced as well. So I don't know how old. I think 862 is pretty new. I know that I don't have it on this machine, so I'm not certain. Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
863 came out yesterday or the day before, so it may be one of those quick ones that they fixed in the list of and other fixes.
Cool. All right, next question.
Coming in from our friend Hasmik Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. He says from yesterday, Chris Fenwick is into ZoomISO Companion and Streamdeck. What is the setup? Why are you doing it? And what are you learning?
I'm recording Zoom meetings. I'm sorry. I assume that's coming to me.
Yeah, it is. Yep. Okay. Yep. Sorry. Yep.
I'm recording Zoom meetings, and I could show you. I literally just finished this little diagram. But basically what I'm doing is I have a Mac Mini, and I'm using two of these little pluggable devices. And this is a newer device that Mr. Carluccio recommended that I try using. So I now have a bunch
who makes that device again?
It's made by Pluggable. And it's a display link device. The M1 Mac Mini, only 8 gigabytes, will actually allow you to plug both of those in. From that, this little window here represents my. I actually use Apple Remote Desktop to drive that Mac Mini. There's no monitor, keyboard, or mouse plugged into it. And from that, I actually now get 5 displays. 4 of them are coming off the pluggable devices. The 5th one is actually the HDMI output. And ZoomISO needs 1 display just for its user interface. So you're going to lose 1 display just for that. And I use that. That's the HDMI output. So all 5 of those cables run. I only drew 4. I just realized I should have drawn a 4th. Go into my ATEM Extreme ISO. That way I have 1 button. It records to the little Samsung, And I drive all of this off of the iMac Pro. What dawned on me with the Companion, and Companion allows me, I actually have my Companion set up to look at the grid of the layout and align the actual people. Like if you're in the upper left-hand corner, Alex, you would be the button that's in the upper left-hand corner. I don't like searching through 20 names and looking for Alex Lindsay, but I see you in the corner, boom, I can punch you, click on your face, sorry, and then source you out to one of the screens. What dawned on me after playing with this for a couple of days is that I went through a lot of extra work by putting the Companion app on the Mac Mini, because it was the iMac, because it's actually controlling stuff on the Mac Mini. I should have plugged that Streamdeck and put the Companion over here. Would have been much nicer if that was, and it actually attached it to the Mac Mini. I think I'm gonna do that, but currently right now it's kind of working. It's pretty amazing that all of it works as well as it does. And Carluccio is super smart, and I think we're days, maybe hours away from getting ISO audio on every one of those ISO video feeds.
That Carluccio guy, he's got some brain cells up there. That's all I'm saying.
He's got all the ones I've ever lost.
All right, next question.
From Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. I need a monitor keyboard trackpad combo that folds down and slides into a 19-inch rack cabinet. Any suggestions from the group? This is for managing several Mac Minis and a road rack. Thank you.
Good, Rupert.
I've used various ones over the years and encountered lots, but the only memorable one is the Dell one, and I don't even remember what the others were. So, I mean, that's the one I've encountered the most and remember the most.
There you go, Jeff.
Sorry, I've had a lot of trouble with those. They're clunky, so maybe I need to find that Dell. I did see someone who took a mixer rack. So this is designed for a small 19-inch rack mixer in the top, and they used a flip-up screen. So there's a lid that goes on this rack instead. So that's maybe an alternate thing to look at rather than a slide-out tray.
Next question.
All right, coming in from Graham Caldwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Typically, how many computers do the panelists use during an office hours show, and what does each one do?
Go ahead, George.
So I use two. This one I'm on right now is a M1 that's fully loaded. And then I have a MacBook Pro for doing keynotes, showing websites and so forth in a 2-up.
Rupert?
So I use several. One for Zoom that has 3 screens. That gives me active speaker and my notes, and then gallery, and then the controls off to one side, and Mukana I kind of flip between. Second computer for a dedicated participant gallery view, so that's a separate Zoom session. Another PC for bringing in websites or looking up stuff or playing in audio, and then a separate computer for comms, so that gives me Discord and the Mukana chat and some other stuff that I'm using.
Go ahead, Ken.
I used my M1 MacBook Pro for the Zoom, and that has the gallery view on above the camera. I use a M1 Mac Mini to run my monitor, where I have the panel view and Mukana, and that's also outputting a grid. I use another Mac I plug my Brio overhead cam in, and then I use an iPad Pro for Keynote.
Jeffrey?
So I use 2 myself, and same as George, except I also tried it as the telestrator, which I never really used on office hours, but that's okay. And then when Alex was gone on vacation, I was doing all the cutting of the show, and I actually used 3 at that point. One that I would join, one that I'd bring in to get the panel, the gallery, and the individual view, and then the third one, which would scrape those machines, so it would then go back out to YouTube.
And I just have, most days I just use the teleprompter. I have a old laptop that I use for the teleprompter, and then my Mac and my iMac, which is about to get swapped out for Mac Mini. So, and often, and I can, when this is fully set up, it'll be like 4 or 5 Mac Minis that run everything. So everything from the switcher software to other things, and they're all kind of in their own little world. And that's what I'm slowly putting back together. I also want to take this moment to apologize. Earlier, I said Belfast, Ireland. I meant Belfast, Northern Ireland. And I know that that's a sensitive subject, and I apologize for doing that at the top of the show. I said it, and I realized I had never said Belfast and Ireland at the same time. I'd always just said Belfast, and when I said it, I knew that I'd walked into something, and I just walked away from it, and I had to think about it for a second, and so like I was like, I don't know what to say there, so I apologize. It was not meant to be an insult. It was a or attempt to have any politics. I just want to take this moment to say moo moo moo. All right, next question.
Okay, coming in from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. How do the panelists use Loopback in their Zoom audio chain? What does Loopback add to that a straight mixer can't, besides confusion?
Yeah, so for some simple meetings or something like joining the panel in office hours or in after hours, I use Loopback to be able to strip just a single channel of my interface and bring that into Zoom, because if Zoom sees more than 2 channels coming in from an interface, it sums all of those into mono. So most of the time you wouldn't want that. In other situations, you can route all sorts of application audio to Zoom or whatever conferencing platform you use.
Leo?
Yeah, so as Mickey says, the nice thing is Loopback enables you to put more things into that from different apps. So this is my Loopback setup here. What you're actually seeing is that you're coming in on, I'm coming in on the Flow 8, which is me, and on to the top channels. At the bottom here, you've got Zoom coming in, and Zoom is coming into my headphones, but not going out, so I can listen to Zoom. And I can also bring in the audio from Adobe Premiere here, and you can see Google Chrome. Google Chrome is turned off at the moment. So you can actually control and see things that are coming from your PC and create mixed minuses on your PC that you don't want to go in and out.
Next question.
Okay, coming in from Ari Block in Tel Aviv, Israel. What would be some useful typical use cases and workflow scenarios for the Dante Virtual Sound Card?
Mickey?
So yeah, in any situation where you need to route computer audio in and out of a computer to either to other computers or Dante enabled hardware, Dante DVS would come in handy for that. You can use it to feed, say, a mix from a Dante enabled mixer to Zoom, or play out audio from QLab, for example, into a mixer, a Dante enabled mixer. There's so much flexibility with the DVS.
Yeah, we use it for all of our Zoom machines, all have DVS in them, and that's how we get the audio in and out. Although I will say that we are most likely moving to hardware over time, just because the DVS is a little less stable than just plugging in hardware that will do do Dante. And we've had a couple unexpected glitches that have us moving towards more hardware. Go ahead, John.
I've got an X32 back here with the Dante card on it, and that's on my LAN, and then I can access my Shure Accent mics from any machines with DVS running on it. It works great.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I primarily use DVS for recording, so I'll go to a concert hall that has a Yamaha PA system, and I can tap into their Dante, just bring a laptop and an Ethernet cable and grab any input that's on the stage. If I'm going and just doing recording itself, I get a Dante Snake from the stage to my recording room. And I can also use a virtual mixer in the computer and feed out via an Aviom into a camera and into a streaming system. So all of the audio is routed via Dante.
Next question.
Coming in from Hazmat Gajar, a sometime panelist here in Cape Town, South Africa. Mickey, being away from office hours and as a panelist for some weeks now, how does it feel being back? Have you noticed any changes?
Yeah, so first off, I'm a huge fan of after hours. I treat it like I don't listen. I have like 6-7 months of podcasts that I still need to listen to, and I have totally stopped because of after hours. This new panel view is new to me, and I think it's only been around for a couple of days. Still getting used to it. Aside from that, almost everyone else's audio and video quality has inched up. Like every week, there's oh you're coming in on a new camera. Oh, you're coming in on a new microphone. So yeah, that's something I noticed. Like when I see someone that I haven't seen in a while. So good image, good sound. Yeah, but nice to be back.
I just like to say it for the record, it is great to have you back, Mickey. So welcome back. We love having you. So it's
Thanks,
there's been a lot of them where like, well, we can't answer that question because Mickey's not here. so anyway, or so it's good to have you back. All right, next question.
Another question from Hosmet Gajar in Cape Town. I've heard interesting use of the HDMI out in the ATEM Extreme in production. Can panelists share some of the not so obvious implementations?
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, so when we have done some in-person events, we've actually run all of our video playback out, but we actually play it back and then we run it straight to one of the outputs and use that in the venue. So we're actually running them all through the same point, and everything is coming through the ATEM, and we're dealing with that. The other thing we also do is if we add in any lower thirds or anything else on the downstream, we actually push that back into the ATEM onto another port, because when we press record on the ATEM ISO, we also get a copy of that. So we end up recording the program out twice, both coming out of the ATEM and back into the ATEM from the PC that was doing it. So we've just got an extra copy of everything.
And I feed mine out so that I can do this telestrator. So that this is going to my Wacom tablet. So one goes out to that. The other one goes into the other one goes. I have a multi-view that I'm looking at. So those are the two HDMI outputs that I use. Next question.
Another question from Hosmek. Do any of the panelists use a teleprompter in office hours for talent in productions? What works and what doesn't work?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I use the 24-inch prompter people, and pretty much everything works for me. It's hard for me to read as I'm getting older, and it's super helpful to have the Makana, or if I'm in a regular meeting, being able to see the text and still maintain the eye contact. I absolutely love it. I got it from the DV store, thanks to Guy Cochran.
Go ahead, George.
I'm on a 10-inch teleprompter. The way I have it set up right now, I could see Alex straight on. I have my gallery view on my monitor down below, so I keep eye contact with whoever is speaking. I also have a secondary ATEM mini that I could punch through my multi-view for the ATEM and put any source into it, so I could see what's going on.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I wonder whether Hosmet was asking about what works actually in production, working with talent like on set. But I was also going to mention that, I mean, I'm not using a teleprompter. I'm using a 10-inch monitor set back behind my main monitor, and then my camera's kind of basically sitting between the two. It gives me a similar effect. But what's interesting is I was in the Zoom online user community recently, and I saw somebody asking the question there. I mean, I think they were a user, an end user, saying, how do I get better eye contact? So I think it's beginning to, people out there are seeing the good ways of doing it and wondering how to do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we actually started using teleprompters for interviews in the 2006, 2007. So it was what's typically referred to as an interrotron, but it's been used for a long time, and even before Errol Morris, as Courtney will tell you. But the idea, and the largest ones we built, I think the largest one built was a 70-inch, I believe, and a lot of 55-inch ones. But I'm not using one right now. I keep my video right below my lens, but I'm putting one in over the next week. So I'll have a teleprompter back there so that I can keep that eye contact. And if you're more than about 3 feet away, you need the 24-inch, in my opinion, for eye contact. You don't need it for teleprompting, but for eye contact, anything more than about 3 feet back, you need to start getting larger so that you can really see what's going on. Next question.
All right, from Jeff Francis in Columbia, South Carolina, here on the panel. With multiple screens, what are the panelists' favorite monitoring methods?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
He said mounting methods, by the way. And this actually, my answer actually also works with Hasmooks, because I've been building a teleprompter system, because I've been getting a lot of these flat panel gaming monitors to review. And the one big problem with them, excuse me, is if you have even like the iPad teleprompter, they come with like a very thin bar, and you're really trusting that iPad to not tip over with that bar. So, but I then found from Vivo, this is actually a Visa mount option that I can attach to these portable monitors, and then attach it to the teleprompter so it will hold nice and tight into the system. That's what I'm going to be putting into my my rig in the next week or two and test it out.
Go ahead, John Preto.
I spent a lot of time researching this. This is ironic, Jeffrey, because I also use the Vivo arm, and they've dropped the price I see. The nice thing about these is I have 2 monitors on my desk. These go up above those 2 monitors. So I have 4 monitors stacked on top of each other. These are super well-made pieces of gear for the money.
Rupert?
Yeah, I like the Vivo stuff also. I think we've discussed a number of times how really you want to try and stick to monitors that have the Visa mount on the back as much as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be in the situation of needing to get adapters or coming up with rigs to work around it. But if you stick with Visa mount stuff, and then try to stick to one system or one manufacturer of mounting mounts like the Vivo stuff, and then after you get a collection of it, you'll find that you end up mixing and matching the pieces to come up with a complete system that suits your needs.
Courtney?
And if you're a 3D printing aficionado and a DIY guy, I designed a VESA mount, and it'll go on VESA mounts, or if they're like the little portable monitors like Jeffrey was showing earlier, I use command strips, which are from 3M, which is a hard type Velcro. And I just put a couple of strips on this and a couple of strips on the back of the monitor and whack it down, and then I put it onto a Magic Arm, the new our Manfrotto Magic Arm, and use that to hold my monitor. And if you'll hit me up in Discord, I'll send you the STL files.
I use the Huano Nuo arms. I've got a bunch of them. They're from a cost perspective, they're really good. They're $82. I will say that I believe that the Amazon ones are better at $250. The monitors in motion are better at $400 or $500. But the ones that I have like sitting around right now, they're a little stiff, but they work pretty well. I also I have a clamp, a Visa clamp for my iPad, so I can put on one of those arms. I can put that. I can put a iPad that I can swing into place. So that actually works pretty well for me as well. And remember that if you are on a set and you have C-stands, that Film Tools makes baby pin to Visa mount, which are super useful. And so we've used those a lot. Next question.
Coming in from Craig McFarlane in Boston. In the mic check, I noticed many had similar lower thirds showing their audio path. Fenwick, are those from a template?
So I'll explain a little bit of it, and then because I don't want to put Chris on the spot. What we call those are Fenwicks. Now there are authentic Fenwicks and faux Fenwicks. So if Chris makes one for you, it's an authentic Fenwick. And we've been trying to get, once we figure out how to reduce the cost of NFTs, we're going to get Chris to do NFTs on them so that you can really say that you have an NFT of a proper Fenwick. It's going to be authentic Fenwick or a proper Fenwick. And you can see Chris using a proper Fenwick right now. Now, if you make your own, which is great, you're being creative, but just know that you're making a faux Fenwick. It's a faux Fenwick. We don't like to use the word fake. We don't, that's a very rough way to say it, but
I have no problem calling it fake. As a matter
the
of fact,
great thing is it doesn't cost you anything. If you ping Chris on
I'll gladly make him.
He'll make you, and like right now, like back at, you wait until these are selling for $100,000 each, and you're gonna be like, hey, Chris just gave me one. It's practically a Picasso. Like in the early days while Picasso was still, it's a Fenwick. So
it wasn't worth anything while he was alive.
Exactly. Exactly. So just hang on to that ping and keep sending Chris.
So if I may, yes, there is a template graphic that I have, and I've made a bunch of them. This is one of my favorite ones. I made this one for Alex because he likes to bring the tank to the store. And yes, I have made many of them.
Yeah.
So there's
so just
yeah, a bunch.
Just ping Chris if you want a real Fenwick, or build your own faux Fenwick. It's up to you. It's just you just need to know
Get a real one.
You have the opportunity to have a real one. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't even take any time. It just takes time to get on Discord and ask for a Fenwick. All right. Next question.
From Matt Parker in Sarasota, Florida. When using a VPN to connect to another network, how do you identify what your IP address is on the remote network, Mac, PC, or other network-connected hardware?
Go, George.
So I could speak 2 quick pieces. So for log me in, which Tucker turned me on to, it gives you an IP address for each individual machine. So you could actually see what the IP addresses are. I could see that on my AWS machines. I could identify it. For my VPN to my Ubiquity network, there's a VLAN that's set up for that. So I know exactly what IP addresses to use, and I could see put those IPs on AWS and see them connect. So that's the way you identify that locally and remotely.
All right, Mickey.
Yeah, so on a Mac, you can go into terminal and type ifconfig, and that will give you a list of all the network parameters for all your network interfaces. On a PC, on Windows, that would be ipconfig. So ifconfig for Mac.
And then Rupert.
Yeah, this can vary a little bit. If all those methods are accurate if you're using a client VPN, if you're connecting one machine to a remote VPN. But if you have 2 networks connected together in a site-to-site configuration where it's done at your router level, your machines aren't going to have IP addresses on those VPNs. They will just communicate with their LAN IP addresses, LAN to LAN.
Next question.
Coming in from Danny Law in Malaysia. What is the panelist's preferred monitor size and why when using a multi-monitor setup when editing video or doing creative works?
Leo?
So I've always been a 24-inch monitor person. I don't know if it's historical. It's always been the size that has worked out the best size for me. I can find I can have multiple monitors sitting next to each other. As soon as I go up to anything larger, I find that my eyes get really tired because I'm scanning too big a surface. So the distance between a 24 and my face is about a hand's length, and that to me has always been optimal.
Go ahead, George.
I have 27 inches. With the 27-inch, I could see from side to side with no issues. Anything larger than that wouldn't work for me.
Go ahead, Ken.
I use a 32-inch XDR display. It's a beautiful piece of glass.
Rupert.
For like my productivity workstation, I, like Leo, have used 24-inch for a few years now, and 1, 2, 3. I find that gives me the nicest angle of turn and being, straight onto my work surface. And I like the separation of 3 to give you the separate workspaces in your operating system so you can snap stuff to the right place.
Yeah, I find that I've tried 24 and 27 for general purpose, and I prefer 24 myself. My main computer, sometimes I like to do 27, but generally 24 is my preference. Next question.
Coming in from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. What are the distinctions between the Ursa 4.6K G2 and the 12K? Does the panel expect the 4.6K to also have a price drop?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, the primary difference, because these cameras are made as a family that are easy to operate and easy for operators to swap between. So there's a great commonality between the interface, both on the screens and where the buttons are. They're made to be easy to swap around. The only real differences are in the sensor, with the 12K using the new layout rather than a Bayer sensor. The 4.6K, because it's an older sensor, the color science is a little bit more mature for that sensor. And they do claim an extra stop dynamic range. The 4.6, I believe, also is windowed in the higher frame rate. So you're getting, instead of the full sensor, you're getting a section of the sensor sampled that they run at a higher speed. Beyond that, there's no real difference, and all the same parts will work with them. And yes, it probably will get a price drop.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, one of the operating differences between the two is on the 12K, if you're plugging in an external drive, you can keep the flip out display closed. because it's got a little gap where you can plug that in, and mine doesn't. So I may be swapping over to the new 12s.
Yeah, the big thing is I've used a lot of G2s and I've tested the 12K, and it's the horsepower behind the 12K is really the issue of being able to shoot 8K 120. I mean, really, you're not dealing with horsepower in the camera. You're dealing with just transfer speeds and how fast your storage can handle it. I wouldn't be surprised if they just discontinue the G2s, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know if they're going to drop the price from those. I wouldn't be surprised if they just stop making them and, you know, and stick with the 12Ks as kind of the replacement for that. They might. It'd be cool, but I would think hard about getting the smaller one. The 12K is incredibly powerful. Like, it's just an incredible machine. So I would really look at it. I'm probably going to try to get one soon because it's just for tests and a lot of the stuff we're doing with 8K. Next question.
From Todd Reynolds in North Adams, Massachusetts. How did Andy Ihnatko do that yesterday with his floating hat, sideburns, and glasses? He's talking about what was on Mac.
I have to ask them. I actually don't know how he did that because it's the inside of his hat. So I think that someone at I think Anthony at Twit might have done some Photoshop work where he grabbed onto. I think the trick is that he grabbed onto a frame of Andy. He painted out Andy except for his sideburns and so on and so forth. And then he put in the inside of a hat to sell the back end of that process. So I think that's what he did is he just had a capture of Andy. It's a quick thing. And then they keyed it over. But I think what was interesting is that it was bouncing just a little bit, which really sold it. So it would have been really cool if he had tracked it in real time to Andy. That would have been amazing, but it just with a little bit of Bob sold it, and I imagine they did that in TriCaster. You know, so I mean, you probably did a Photoshop file and then some kind of little setup for that. That's my guess, but I'm not 100% certain. Go ahead, Courtney.
It seemed to me to be in a 3D because it changed perspective a little bit while it was bouncing, so it seemed to be a 3D object. So he probably brought it into some type of 3D.
Yeah, I didn't notice the 3D part, the 3D perspective. So interesting. I have no idea how he did that. Next question.
All right. From Craig McFarlane in Boston. For travelers, how do you decide what items of your base kit do you buy a duplicate item, tear down for travel, or go without it?
Go ahead, John.
I have a different kit for travel. I use the Polson into a Tech Rise and then the Brio Cam. That's the smallest kit for traveling.
Alan?
I mean, I read the question a little bit differently. I work out which bits are mission critical, show critical, and then I make sure I've got at least a spare of those. And if I'm going somewhere I potentially won't be able to buy something as well, a particular rare item, I make sure I have those with me. But I have one kit basically, and I make sure I've got the spares.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, it largely depend on how quickly you may need to deploy at any point. If you need to go, you need to have a go kit and be ready to go. And then some decisions will be based on what your method of travel is. Is a car, you know, what luggage space have you got available, whether it's domestic and international, how nimble you need to be when you're on site. Have I got to have everything in a backpack so I can run, or have I got space to lug stuff around? How quickly I need to get set back up when I get back to base, that might be a consideration also.
Stuart?
Everything Rupert said, plus I look at the amount of allowance that the ticket gives you for the plane and what have you, how many kilos you've got. Also, don't expect those to be accurate. Sometimes they will say one thing on the website, but you actually get to check out and there's a different amount because they want the plane to be lighter so it uses less fuel. The other thing is I look at what places are available for me to go and buy stuff at the location, and heavy items that I don't absolutely need or that are cheap, things like power extensions, I will leave behind and I will pick up one there. And like, if you don't want to pay for it to come back, you can always donate it to a school or something in that location and they will be happy.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
I do a lot of flying and then I usually take about 200 pounds worth of stuff with me. Pelican cases add weight to your 50-pound allowance. So going either flight or by doing a FedEx into the city beforehand is probably if you need more gear, but then I buy what I need.
For my office hours, I just have a kit that's its own. It's a mixed pre and a Countryman with a Brio and some of the little Pavo tube lights and some couple stands. All still fits into a carry-on. So that's kind of my rule. Okay, we're going to move pretty quickly. We are going to run a little over because we have a lot of questions, and a bug that I have to figure out is that I have to be able to see how many questions we have left if I'm in the panelist view, and I'm a little off. So we'll go as fast as we can. Next question.
Okay, sorry. I was distracted. All right, from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Has the panel talked about Tesla's Artificial Intelligence Day? They are working on a supercomputer, self-driving, Tesla bot, etc.
I haven't really had time to pay much attention to it yet, so I don't know if anybody else has. I think we're still no, we haven't dug into that yet. It's a good question. I know that everyone's worried about camera operators, but could be a little while. All right, the next question.
From Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Do visitors who fill out the Join Us form on the Office Hours Global website get automatically registered to join the Office Hours Zoom? Or do they instead need to follow the Join the Daily Zoom Conversation link?
Go ahead, Ken.
No, they don't get automatically registered to that Zoom, but they do get added to the email list that Alex sends out.
They get added to the one that the MailChimp one. And so one thing that we need to do is send out a thank you for register, like a thank you when they register, and something I meant to bring up. so we'll figure that, we need to send something back, like, here's how you get in immediately. Because there's two different mailing lists. There's one that goes out every day, and then there's one that goes out about once a week. And that's two different things. And so they're not getting it enough right now. That's one of the challenges. But we're working on that. Next question.
Okay, and for your edification, Alex, we only have one AWS question in the queue.
Right. So
since you can't see it.
So we'll run a little over because there's not a lot of AWS questions yet. So if you want AWS questions, ask more, and then we'll feel the pressure. But right now we're gonna answer a couple more of the questions because we have so many stacked up at the moment with votes. So again, if we're at one or less, we'll just push them off, but we have a lot of them with votes. So we're going to keep going. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what brand of rack enclosure would you recommend? I've looked at trip light enclosures, but some of them can be very expensive.
Go ahead, John.
I have bought and built many racks in my life, and I've now ended up with Middle Atlantic, and mine all have wheels on them, so I can move them out and work and then push them back into place. So and get ready to go down a rabbit hole. They have a configurator that's amazing.
Go ahead, George.
With John, I have a Mid-Atlantic slimline rack. It's on wheels, so I can put it in and out. If you're looking for a cost, StarTech has racks also that's pretty cheap.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I have a APC Net Shelter SX 42U, and I'll put the link in Makana.
Mickey?
For networking equipment and for placing in a machine room, I get whatever works in terms of rack units that has a decent rating in Amazon for a rack that needs to be soundproof. I like the Sound Construction and Supplies ISO box, if budget permits, because they're quite pricey. But if not, then build my own.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I would just say in general, it is better to avoid the cheap stuff. The first time you cut yourself on a bit of unfinished metal, or you can't, get a panel back because it's slightly off and the hinges don't fit and things in production, you'll never want to go down the cheap route again. So just get the best quality you can.
Also, the painful choice that you'll start. I did this for a long time using 1032 screws, and having them. You'll get these racks that have the 1032s already built into them. And then you'll go, I'm going to go to 1224 screws, and then I'll do it. And then you'll learn that you should just use rack nuts. so as you go down this path, there's nothing worse than someone using a 1224 into your 1032 and stripping it out. And now you don't have somewhere to put something. when you use rack nuts, it means that if something goes wrong, you can replace that one. It does increase, and I built lots of, like, almost everything we had was 1032 for a long time, until right at the end, people were really, what happened was we had a mixed group of 1224 and 1032, and we had some untrained folks stripping out some of them, and I was like, I'm never buying these again. So anyway, rack nuts are the way to go. So what that means is when you see the rack, you'll see squares instead of screw holes. That means you have to put the rack nuts in, but it's pain to do them. Worth it. Next question.
All right, coming in from Douglas Carmichael. At a local festival, the PA company mentioned using an analog snake instead of Dante because it is easier to fix with traditional electronic skills, multimeter, soldering iron, etc. How does one learn them, and what tools do you usually carry?
Jeff?
You learn soldering by starting the solder, and usually it's building cables and repairing cables. A basic kit, I didn't bring my whole toolkit over, but if I had to pack a really small kit, I would definitely have a multimeter. So you can get a cheap $20 multimeter at Home Depot that covers volts, AC and DC volts, and does resistance. And I'd love one that has a continuity beep. A soldering iron, I would definitely invest in a Weller soldering iron and some kind of station to hold it in. Wire cutters, these are side cutting pliers. This is a wire stripper, needle nose pliers. I like some tweezers, and of course solder, and then the little solder removal bulb.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Jeff covered most of what I was going to say, but I just want to add that two soldering irons that come in handy as well for working in the field would be butane powered ones. I have one from Dremel that I love, and also Ryobi has a battery powered one that just powers off the standard 18-volt battery packs.
Go ahead, Leo.
So taking a slightly different approach of why they said this, the reason that a lot of people will say what they're doing is because of what they are used to doing and what they've spent their life with. I would actually argue that that is a hugely much harder work. If you can make Cat6 cables, you can make Cat6 cables. I guarantee I can make a Cat6 end twice as fast as anybody can resolder a 25-way snake, and right. I can roll out a Cat6 cable on my own. Now, if you can roll out 50 meters of a snake on your own, well done you.
Go ahead, Stuart.
As somebody who has had to resolder 50-meter snakes back together with 32 ends on them, I wholeheartedly and 100% agree with everything Leo just said. That was going to be my answer as well.
Yeah, I think someone saying they want to use analog instead of digital means that they don't understand digital, but it doesn't mean that it's better. That's crazy, like crazy. Like we won't run analog more than like 6 feet. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to add, while rolling out the multiple 64-channel snakes is a pain, and I would definitely much rather do a Dante-based breakout box. You will still have analog audio pieces in your chain from the microphones going into your breakout box. So having that basic knowledge of repairing and building cables is still a definite necessity.
Absolutely. And you definitely need to know how to make the cables. And we're going to do more labs on that. We did a little SDI lab with JJ a while ago. We're going to do more of those coming up soon. Go ahead, Jeff, real quick.
Yeah, I think that the issue with the analog versus Dante is probably learning the networking skills.
Yeah,
and it's that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to still move a little quickly. For those of you just tuning in, we have a lot of questions from the first hour and not many questions from AWS, and so we're focused. Although AWS is now picking up, so we'll move through these as fast as we can. Next question.
Okay, from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. In a Zoom meeting, when I am host and when I rearrange my own grid view, I have the option to set follow host's view order. This seems to enforce my own grid view order for the participants. Is this a new feature?
I think it is. For it to follow yours on the broadcast, I think that's new. In the past, it was deciding on its own. So I think that is new. Next question.
Coming in from James Babbitt in San Diego, there's a new 31.5-inch LG 4K HDR OLED monitor for $3,999. Could the panel compare this to the Apple 32-inch 6K HDR Pro Display XDR for $5,000?
I would be a little concerned about the the OLED as a monitor for my computer. I don't know. I mean, it may be fine, but OLED I always worry that I'm gonna have issues with burn-in and so on and so forth. So that'd be the only thing that I would think of. I know the 32 is designed for it, and the LG may do fine, but I don't know. Next question.
Coming in from Juan C. Robles in Mexico. Just yesterday, I heard about Nebula, and he puts in a link there, a scalable overlay networking. Someone has tried it, used it. Can it be used to do remote production?
Does anyone use Nebula? I know some folks that have. I'll see if I can see if we can get them on, talk about it. Next question.
Coming in from Jeff Francis here on the panel in Columbia, South Carolina. Has anyone found a 15-inch portable flat panel monitor like Jeffrey P. showed that works at 30 FPS?
Leo?
Unfortunately, I'm not going to add a find. I'm going to say a problem I found with these as well. Most of them are rated at 60, P60. In the UK, we're a P50, which means that when you buy these in the UK and you try and then connect them to an ATEM Mini, they start flashing like mad because obviously you're pushing out 50. So they've been built only for consumer environments where they're not interested about matching up with other things. So I haven't seen any that don't do anything but 60.
I feel like I've never had a Hertz problem with the Lilliputs, the small Lilliputs, but they're smaller. I've used lots of 10-inch ones, but I can't remember a time when they couldn't see a signal that I sent them. So that might be something to also research. I'm not 100% certain. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. This morning, I received an email from a senior product manager at Waves Audio asking for suggestions for improving the SoundGrid ecosystem. I own a SoundGrid studio system. When communicating with vendors, what are some manners to remember?
Go ahead, Mickey.
So don't just say what you don't like and what doesn't work for you. Let them know why and what your specific use cases so that they get a better point of view of why it doesn't work for you.
Go ahead, Rupert.
If I'm being contacted by a vendor, whether it's one I know or not, I think the first responsibility I have is to make sure it's them in this kind of social engineering type thing and phishing. Even like Blackmagic the other day, I think had somebody spamming their customers pretending to be them. So I think if it's somebody I believe I know, the first responsibility I have is to make sure it is them that I'm talking to.
And try to think about the overall market of who's not what you need, but what would make sense for them to build because the market would need this. Not just you, but many people. Next question.
From Fred Eric Eckhart in Germany. I need to build 4 boxes to capture 4 speakers separately in the same room. Any suggestions?
I'm not sure which boxes to capture for. I'm not sure if you're talking about boxes for the people or boxes for the gear. So maybe bring that up tomorrow and we'll try to figure that out because we could do both. Next question.
From Graham Carmichael in Belfast, Northern Ireland. How do you display a Fenwick or an out-of-office picture in the Zoom meeting? Do you need to be feeding your video through something like OBS or an ATEM?
Go ahead, Leo, and then Jeff.
So if you're actually the administrator of your Zoom account, you can actually configure and set. So there's a feature called video filters, and you can actually add in new video filters that can either set as an out of office message or anything. The default one that they show is one with a rainbow flag. You can do that, but it's disabled in this meeting, so I can't show it to you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You can do it via your ATEM. So you can just drop in other images, but also remember that if you're just in a standard Zoom and you're on your webcam, when you shut off your video, it will go to your avatar picture.
Unless it's turned off, because people were abusing it. So that's why it's turned off. Next question.
From David Kaufman in Vancouver, British Columbia. How do you folks secure those darn USB-C docks that we now seem to need, having to move to the new MacBooks? One slip and I lose the show.
Jeff?
2 words, gaffer's tape.
Yeah, go ahead. George?
So OWC sell these little things called Klingons, and you could definitely put on the end of your docks. Also, every Sonnet box comes with these little screws that goes into their box here, secures a little bit more.
Next question.
All right, from Douglas Carmichael. Mickey, what is the audio hijack session next to you doing? It looks complicated.
Go ahead, Mickey.
So what it's doing right now is feeding the meters into this, well, generating the meters that we see here in this panel, and also doing multiple stages of dynamics processing to feed audio to Makana.
Next question.
From Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland. Does Blackmagic Design HyperDecks need spacers or 7mm thickness SSDs to work reliably?
And since no one has it written there, they don't. You can just stick them in. You just have to find where they want to go. So they'll. So we use a lot of the Samsungs, which are thinner, and it's not a problem. You just have to push them in. They'll find their way into where they're going. Remember that SSDs are only rated for 150 insertions. So as you start to use SSDs as tape, just remember that they will wear out, just like tape would. But they will wear out and start to fail. Next question.
All right, coming in from Douglas Carmichael. Any panelists use 500 series audio modules with which modules do you prefer?
I don't think anybody here uses them. So I think we'll move on. Next question.
Sorry, didn't take. Another one from Douglas Carmichael. Rupert mentioned that some production professionals need to travel at short notice. In what sectors do you usually see that?
Rupert?
My background is in IT, but I've worked in all kinds of vertical markets, and I'm not sure I have seen one where it isn't sometimes required to travel at short notice sometimes.
Next question. I'm sorry, Mickey. Sorry, I missed it. Sorry. Still working on
yeah. In all aspects of media production, be it video, print, film, it's a culture of hurry up and wait, and that includes travel.
Yeah, I have a go bag. Everything's cleaned, everything's ready to go. I've got toiletries, I've got my kit, everything ready to go. I can usually leave in 20 minutes if I needed to. I wouldn't have any extra stuff, but I can be on the road very quick, very fast. All right. We're now going to change gears to AWS. Sorry for the delay. We did gave everybody a little more time, and now we have lots of AWS questions and some good AWS experts here. So I think that we're going to have a good 45 minutes here. So let's go ahead and jump into and Greg and Jeff, do you have access to the back end, the new panelist view? All right, I'm going to send that to you.
Actually, Alex, Leo sent me the link, and I clicked the link, but I don't have the access yet.
Let me fix that for you. There we go. And then Jeff, I'm going to send this to you in Discord. This will just take a second.
And Greg, you're coming in 4 or 5 dB too hot there.
Oops. Jeff, I just sent you something that you didn't need. Hold on a second.
I don't know what changed. I did the mic check earlier this morning. Okay.
So Jeff, you just have to click on that. Just click on that and then request access, and I'll pop you through. This is why we have to show up in mic checks, Jeff. Just letting you know. We're glad to have you here for AWS, so I'm not going to give you too much trouble. But
sorry, I was live on a streaming media panel with Streaming Media Magazine.
Oh, fine. Be that way.
Sorry.
I see where your priorities are. You should see it in Discord. Yeah. And Greg, you're in. You see it? And so all you gotta do is raise your hand in the back end. You just there's a little hand next to every one of those questions, and you just hit the hand if you want to answer it. So we don't raise your hand in the video anymore. We're past that. That's so last week.
Progress.
Yeah, exactly. So all right, and same for you, Jeff. You should see it now on the back end. All right, good. All right, let's jump into the first question.
All right, from Andy Carluccio in Washington, D.C. What is the lowest friction way to get an operator on the ground access to control interface in the cloud? Thinking about how to do the Office Hours 2.0 control panel, maybe Jonas's suggestion of publishing the controller to a public URL.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so I did spend a little bit of time with Jonas on using AWS AppStream to essentially embed different types of graphical user interfaces into a web interface. So maybe that's what he was going with, but that's certainly a low friction way, essentially. So you're able to create your own custom view of an application, embed it into a web page, and push it out to users. And obviously you'll want to put some authentication around that.
Next question.
Okay, this one coming in from David Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland. Has anyone had success running Zoom rooms virtually in AWS? Software installs, but won't run.
We've had a few people able to figure it out, but I don't think that they're publishing their knowledge yet. so I think it's still some folks are figuring it is possible, but I think that folks are still hanging on to that one a little bit. I won't call anybody out, but I think that the knowledge is floating around a little bit. I have a feeling that by the time we would want to capitalize on that, they'll make it available. So I think rooms will be available soon enough as it is, but it's kind of an unofficial and unsupported way to do it. Next question.
Coming in from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia, here on the panel. What's the simplest way to connect the output stream from an AWS session to a company's own website?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I think if he's if you're referring to video streams, so AWS has a media package service that in turn will allow you to connect that to a AWS CloudFront CDN, which then can be posted up on your website.
Okay. Next question.
Right,
and by the way, we are going to do some more work through on that area in the next month. My plan is to do this AWS. We'll probably do some labs between now and then, but we'll do a little overview of how to go from a basic stream into AWS all the way to a player. I think that is something people need to understand, and I don't think we've covered it well enough. So we'll be doing that in the next month. Next question.
Coming in from Dave Kaufman in Vancouver, British Columbia. Getting started with AWS is intimidating. What's the hello world of learning AWS video in the cloud?
Go ahead, George.
So one, AWS has their own training that you could tap into. It's a little bit limited, but if you come back and look at office hours, Ken has done a great job of putting together everything that's been done in office hours on the website. So that's a good resource.
Greg?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very intimidating to get started. And for me, I wanted to know, well, first of all, nothing is intuitive about it. Like the terminology just sounds like Greek or Latin. And I wanted to know how to do it right. And so my advice is to go out and find somebody like Jeff Keithley or Tucker. Jim Hankins is pretty humble about it, doesn't talk about it a lot, but Jim Hankins is a great expert on cloud infrastructure. So my advice, if you want to learn how to do it right, is to engage one of those guys to help you get started. That's what I did. You can find people who will just set it up for you, but I never wanted to be in a position where I was in a production and had a problem and couldn't solve that problem myself, because Jeff is a great guy and he responds quickly, and so does Tucker, but I can't depend on them to be there for me in a time of difficulty. So I wanted to know how to do it right and how to manage it myself. So that's my advice.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that we're going to be doing more labs on and after hours and then some second hours on is really how to build these different pipelines up. And a lot of it is not only are we self-sufficient in that sense, but we also will learn faster together, because as a lot of us get to do it and understand it, it just means that there's more people to bounce ideas off of. And we're already seeing people, the whole group accelerating as more knowledge ends up in the group. So we'll be spending more time on that. Go ahead, Leo.
The one thing I would say where AWS is very forgiving is that you can build, throw away, but do remember to turn off at the end of the day. Otherwise, you may find that your credit card doesn't look the shape it did 24 hours before.
I left an instance on all night and $11 gone. $11 I'll never get back. Jeff?
At 11, I've done that on one thing, and $17,000 disappeared.
Thank you, Leo. You topped my record too, so that makes me feel better. Mine was only 12,000, so that was a whole month.
We got it back. We got it back.
You have to go back and forth with AWS a lot. I was going to echo with what you said, Alex. Is when it comes to a group learning, it's amazing the little shortcuts that just workflows, things that I do every day that I don't even think about. But other people may have a different way of doing it. And it was like, oh, well, that's easier. And then I've done the same thing. It's like clients are like, well, I was going through these 5 different steps to be able to log in. I'm like, you just have to right click right here. And they're like, oh. And so that kind of where we can have multiple brains together of what works best and what may work for somebody, may not work for others. But that's a big part that I've found is very beneficial.
And my goal with this hour, we're going to have this hour every month, is that we'll have labs where a handful of us are spending an hour or two just working through ideas on how to do something. But the idea is that we trade notes at least once a month as a group, and just like, okay, what are we learning? What are we figuring out? What are we stuck against in short form in the second hours? But you'll see more labs coming up in after hours as well. Go ahead, Greg, one more time.
Just to kind of along the lines of what Jeff was talking about, I mean, groupthink is very powerful, and you could take advantage of after hours, which is actually a great platform for that kind of groupthink. And in fact, last week, Chirag and Jonas actually built Tony Mobley's show in a breakout room in the cloud in office in after hours. Yeah. And they actually produced the show in the breakout room. So if you'd been on after hours during that time and jumped in that breakout, you could have seen exactly what they were doing.
No pressure. No pressure. Next question.
All right, coming in from TJ Worrell in Minneapolis. In addition to office hours, what are the reliable sources of info on video production on AWS? I'm pretty sure there are many pieces of I don't know what I don't know, and I'm anxious to learn.
Go ahead, George.
So I've been spending a lot more time on Horizon Visions that makes SRT. Well, the founders at SRT, they have a really good base of white papers that is really informative, and you could pick up a lot of nuggets. Once you kind of learn the process of AWS, you could start filtering yourself out to different avenues that support AWS to get more knowledge about how to get things into the cloud.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think it comes down to how fast do you need the information. That's what it comes down to. If you need the information fast and you want to accelerate your learning, then hire a consultant. Like Greg said earlier, if you've got all the time in the world and you just love watching YouTube videos, then there's a plethora of information out there. Most of it's right, but there are still a lot of information out there that you can get from reading white papers, like George said, or from YouTube videos and training and things like that.
Go ahead, Greg.
And if you want something that's vMix specific, there's a really good YouTube video by, I think the channel name is Opalcast, who I think they were putting together a gaming production and they used vMix in the cloud for that. And he put together a pretty nice video on how to get that set up. There's also a really good blog post on AWS about setting vMix up in the cloud. And then finally, there's a guy named Michael Lang, who's a really strong producer. He has a few YouTube videos that are pretty helpful, and I'll put those links to those in the Mukana chat.
And next question.
This one coming in from Danny Law in Malaysia. Other than using the elemental boxes, what other method would be recommended to send multicam feeds from a live show to be cut in the cloud?
Go ahead, George.
You have a couple of options depending. You could send SRT feeds from vMix to the cloud to AWS Connect, to Media Connect, and you could pull those into vMix in the cloud from Media Connect also. There's a couple of other solutions out there that you can use to send SRT from expensive to decent price.
Jeff?
For us, LiveView LU800s that are going into the LRT structure that's there. We also use the Matrox Edge, Monarch Edge, which is a 4-channel unit also. Videon for single channels. And then if we have a large channel count, we're using the Sienna NDI Cloud, which is a purpose-built Ubuntu box that links, either takes in SDI or NDI converts it over, and then puts it back together in the cloud. So it just depends on the budget you're at and what your capabilities are.
Go ahead,
what you
Guy.
need.
Yep, Guy.
Yeah, those high vision Makitos. I think Jeff has one of those, and then there's also this box from Pro Encoder that's $995, and the way that you receive it is. Are you guys hearing an echo?
I'm not hearing an echo.
Okay. This is in the cloud running SRT mini server. So then you can receive, right now I have it hooked up to receive some Larix broadcaster QR codes. So basically you can go in here and you can say that you want to have QR codes like this one. So if somebody hit this with their iPhone right now, it would open up Larix broadcaster, and you can then sync these as well. You could sync these. So this is a beta portion of the software, but if you had a sporting event, you can actually have 9 of these coming into your vMix instance. So this is one instance that feeds over to another instance, and I can pull 9 feeds of 9 iPhones, or 9 of those boxes that I held up, or 9 SRT feeds from Greg or anybody else who wanted to send me something. It's just an address with a port number.
Yeah, and the tricky part is, of course, keeping frame sync between them all. You know, so and one of the things that we've done in the past that on a less expensive route is to do a 4K image that's 4-up, you know, without any borders. So you actually send you find a way on one side to send a 4K image out. So like nowadays the new AWS link like this one will do 4K out. And so you can send 4K into the cloud and then grab onto quadrants and separate them out in the cloud there. That's another way. That's a less expensive way to keep them. You know that they'll all be coming in at the same time because they all came in together. You know, so that's that's one way to keep those frames synced up perfectly. Next question.
Coming in from R.A. Block in Tel Aviv, Israel. What are the pros and cons of the EC2 G4 versus the NICE or NICE DCV instances? Any others to consider?
Go ahead, George.
So the G4s, they pretty much go across the board. NICE is just one flavor. I use NICE for a few of my instances. They're the AWS versions. So that allows you to use you could use any of them with Parsec or any other remote. You can't use it with Teradici, but that's just one flavor of it.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, actually, Ari, the EC2 G4 instances are that's just like a computer type. Think of it like an i9 or an i7 or something like that. And the G4s just happen to be the ones that have the graphics drivers that are good for doing video production. So it's like the right combination of equipment for video production. NICE DCV is basically just a client server interface that allows you to remote into that virtual machine and manipulate that virtual machine. So NICE DCV, Teradici, Parsec, they're all just software interfaces that allow you to connect to that machine and work with it on your desktop.
Next question.
Coming in from Leo Mandel in Penner, UK, and here at the panel. With AWS moving at pace, why would anyone still build physical infrastructure?
Go ahead, Leo.
So I come from a web background. We used to build our own servers. We used to host our own equipment and spent an absolute fortune on equipment that when you pulled it out of the rack at the end of 5 years, there was a scratch on the side when you put it in and a scratch on the side when you took it out and a big dent in your wallet. And we've seen it moved that we just don't want to know about it anymore. I just do not want to know about it. I don't want to know about any of the hardware, etc. So I've seen this move, and I've seen there is that reality now on other areas that people are sitting there going, well, yes, I did it in the past and maybe I shouldn't be. And I'm just wondering how further people are going to say, we did do it. It was the right way of doing it. We were switching with local switches. Should we just be going off this?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
This is a great conversation. Okay, so for some events and some applications, having infrastructure on the ground is still, whether it's on the ground in a master control situation that you're remoting from point to point, or having it in a data center and having a rack that you're renting that rack or racks that, as Leo was saying, that you're just putting gear in and you're pulling gear out. If you were doing 24/7 production, unless that is multiple clients paying you, But if you just have one client, then it may depend. You may have one client that pays you enough to just have that infrastructure as an OpEx. That's just operating expenses, and that's it. And you don't have to worry about leveraging the CapEx side of it and being able to amortize it and be able to write it off. It just depends on your business model. But if you're doing short things, that's where the cloud really, really excels. So short, maybe a day or hour for that matter. But whenever you're talking about 24/7, there's still an advantage to having a data center or having a rack that is built, purpose built just for those features. And if that's just all you need to do, but if you need to grow it, then you have the ability to tie in through things like AWS Direct Connect. You can tie into the AWS infrastructure to leverage that fast growth if you need to. And that is what I'm finding a lot of our clients, not a lot, a few of our clients are headed that way. I think more will be heading that way also.
Go ahead, Greg.
I come at from more of a virtual production standpoint. I know Jeff is more like, live on camera and on premises. What I find in the virtual world is that as great as the AWS machines are, they are nowhere near as powerful, as robust as my desktop computer. So for example, on my i9 workstation here with just a 2080 Super GPU, I can run vMix with like 150 inputs. I can run Zoom. I can do a stream to YouTube and Facebook, and I can do a local record on this machine, no problem at all. In the cloud, that becomes a little bit trickier. And when you get in the cloud, things like load balancing become more important. And a lot of it has to do with the GPUs. Well, two things. One, like in the cloud on the G4DN machines, you can get cores out the wazoo. So like a 64 core or 128 core machine is no problem. Problem with them is the clock speeds are not as high as you're going to find on a desktop computer, and the GPUs are not as robust. And so, for some things, it just makes more sense to do it, locally here.
We're building towards things that are not available in the cloud. So we're building things out that a handful of clients are getting interested in, and a lot more will be interested later this year as the pressure builds around the kind of content that we're building. This is mostly dealing with high dynamic range and spatial audio and so on and so forth. And so that's coming. And right now, getting that support effectively in the cloud is not possible. So we know that it will be, but until it is, we have to stick with hardware. Next question.
This one coming in from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. For switching in the cloud, what is considered the minimum safe upload bandwidth for each source camera at a remote venue?
Jeff?
Source camera. Okay, now I understand. I was thinking the opposite, how much to actually control the switcher. Control the switcher under 5 megs symmetrically. But for the camera sources themselves, 5 would be pushing the low end. I would lean more towards 10. Most our live views, for instance, we're pushing 15 meg. For SRT on our Monarchs, we're also pushing about 15 meg. So that's kind of where I'm at, 10 to 15 meg for H.265. So HEVC. But it would be even higher if I was doing H.264.
Next question.
From Andy Carluccio in Washington, D.C. Any hopes for the AWS keynote at Zoomtopia this year?
Is there I guess there is. I guess it's hopes for the AWS. I think it would be just the integration, maybe Zoom Rooms support, but probably it's just a tighter integration with Zoom is probably my guess. And just talking about what that would look like. Next question.
From Juan C. Robles in Mexico. What is the easy and preferably free way to start playing with AWS?
Jim?
Yeah, so you can sign up on the AWS website for an account. It will require a credit card, but that for the first year, a number of services are available for free, and you just have to go through as you're playing with different services to ensure you're staying within that free tier. Specify limits. So there's ways to put alerts on your billing so that you don't go over a specific budgeted amount. And I just suggest going through the documentation, and there's a number of tutorials, and just go one by one through them and play. You can do a tremendous amount of things within the free tier.
Go ahead, Greg.
There's also, like, after you sign up, they have in the past offered a $300 credit. So you just have to go through and fill out a little form, and typically it's fairly easy to get approved. So you go ahead and open your AWS account and do a little searching around. You should be able to find that $300 credit offer.
Next question.
From Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, and here on the panel, Blackmagic is partnered with Amazon Nimble Studio. But what is Amazon Nimble Studio?
I believe that Amazon Nimble Studio, and I haven't used it, is a back end that will allow for a lot of cloud resources for visual effects and for production. My guess is that Blackmagic's partnership with Nimble Studio is related to Resolve and probably less related to their hardware. So I think it's more about how Resolve ties into that pipeline as opposed to the hardware solutions. Next question.
All right, coming in from Chris Russo in Nashville, Tennessee. Is there a recommended workflow in AWS to record growing files during a live event that allows the ability to clean up and edit files during the show, allowing a quick turnaround for delivery to YouTube and other social media platforms?
Jeff?
We actually use both the Sienna processing engine to do that and also the VisVector Plus. Both of those platforms can record to a growing NDI file, and that NDI format can be edited live at the same time. So that works out really, really well for us. As far as a less expensive way, and I apologize, I'm going to butcher the name. It's Lofus, I believe. They have a ISO recorder for NDI, and then you could also use that LOFAS. Just Google ISO recorder or NDI ISO recorder, I believe is what they're calling it.
And the most fully featured one that we've seen so far is Blackbird, and we'll see if we can bring those guys on and talk a little bit about it. I don't think we've brought them on yet, but they're not inexpensive, but very full featured, closed captioning, multiple outputs, multiple inputs. A lot of multi-tenancy. It's a really powerful platform. It takes a lot to set up in AWS to get it running, but once you have it set up and running, it's pretty impressive. Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McCrae again in Dallas. Amazon Web Services is exhibiting at NAB Show. What might they be showing? Crystal ball time.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
So in a number of years I've been going to NAB, they've always had a presence, and it's pretty much being there for their partners and being able to visit the booth. So that they haven't really announced anything special, just having the presence.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of times you'll see Elemental and then AWS services and so on and so forth, but almost all of it seems to be, as George said, there's lots of meeting rooms all around the AWS booth, and they are going, but it sounds like it's going to be a limited exposure there, so to speak. Next question.
Another one from Rupert McCrae in Dallas. Is it better to get on invoice terms with AWS for production rather than rely on credit card billing for critical applications?
Jim?
Well, the first thing on your credit card billing component, you can have additional billing methods put on. So if there was a problem with one particular card, you'll have a failover to there. That's the easy method. From the perspective of advantages, probably. Depending on the size of your spend, it may be a valuable option for you. And sometimes it's required if you're in a public company. They have their own required terms and conditions. So,
yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
For us as a small business, for me, it's credit card points.
I know. I was going to say, you're
points
like
and miles.
You get a lot of miles out of that. So yeah, exactly. and I have, I lost a credit card and had it swapped, and then my AWS, was connected to that card, and I did get a lot of warnings before. Nothing happened. But it's not like it just suddenly turned all my services off. They gave us a fair bit of, gave me a fair bit of safety. I didn't even pay attention for a little while, and then I was like, oh, I got to fix this. So go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Alex, not specifically about the credit card question, but I wanted to just bring up the fact, everybody wants to talk about the hourly rates on AWS, and, that's what most people look at when they think about cost of AWS. I just wanted to say, there are other incidental costs that you do incur. So for example, I keep about 20 machines active. I don't have them running all the time, but I have about 20 machines that I can access and turn on at any given time. And so it costs me about $7 a day just to have those machines sitting there ready to go. And then of course you have bandwidth charges as well. So a lot of times when we talk about AWS fees on here, we're just talking about the hourly rates, but there are a few other incidental fees in there as well that will add to the cost.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, it says Azure has a hard spending limit you can turn on, and Google Cloud will not charge you unless you upgrade your account to a paid account. Considering the horror stories of bill shocks, could you see AWS introducing a do not exceed spending limit?
Go ahead, Leo.
So yeah, there are shocks and there are horror stories, but the reality with this, if you're going to be serious on AWS, you need somebody who actually manages your accounts and manage your billing. My billing with AWS, even on a good month, is over £10,000 a month. So the way we do it is we actually manage it. It's looked at as a resource, and you manage it like any other resource, and you actually have to sit there and go through your bills every single month. Also, what it does is they give you a very, very detailed breakdown, and they will give you alerts if you're going to go over any figure. So when you look at that high figure, and others have talked about, and Greg talked about some of the elements, you actually have to drill down into every single one. You have to look at your DNS charges. You have to look at your S3 buckets. You can move some of those over to, I think it's Iceberg or something like that. Can't remember what it is, to make them even slower, and they become cheaper and cheaper. It's a big thing. The big thing that everybody did at the beginning of when they moved over to AWS in the corporate environment is they were said, this is going to be cheaper than running your own hardware. And it starts off cheaper, but it's like anything else. It just starts going up and up and up and up and up. And you can keep bringing it down if you manage it. So it's a lot about management.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say the exact same things, Leo. It's all about learning the tools and managing it. And it's not for the faint of heart. If you're going to go this route, be prepared to spend some money. Just like you start off in any venture, at some point you have to buy something, you have to spend money on it. And it's the same way with AWS. It's going to cost you to play. So if you don't feel like you can pay for it, then don't play.
Greg?
Sorry, I was late on that, Alex, but just to give you an idea, like ballpark cost, like let's say I'm doing an event, a virtual event, and I'm going to run, let's say 6 or 8 machines, and I'm going to run that all day. It's going to cost me about $100 to $150 to run those machines for a full day. Do you agree, Jeff? That about right?
Yep. Yep. Next question.
Coming in from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. Guy, do those QR codes you showed earlier work with Android and in Larynx?
Yeah, that's exactly what they are. If you hit this with Larynx, so in this instance, you can see that there's a couple different ways that you can create those QR codes. There's some that are called Remote Expert is another app that you can use that's made by the same Guerrerian company.
This works by this is a QR code. You show that to, you take Larynx, you show it to that, and it automatically
just to open up your camera app. You don't even have to open up Larynx. You just open up your camera on your phone, hit this. So if anybody hits this right now with their phone, okay. And so now I see Stuart popping up in right there. He's on number 1, and I'm seeing him on my other instance pop up in my vMix on my main machine on my cutting. So here, I'll flip over to my cutting machine here in just a sec, and we'll see him pop in. So I like to open up this test sometimes in the SRT group. Let me pull this up here. I might get infinity here when I go to do this, but so here, there's Stuart right there on 9009. So I open this up and I'll say, hey, Jim, you get port 9002. Go ahead and send me a feed. Hey, Marcus, you get 903. And then I just let people test their SRT feeds because some people want to test H.265 or HVAC. Some people want to test their phones. But yeah, this is a way that we can just get multiple
each one
cameras
of those,
up.
But you're sending each one of them a QR code that will pull them into that feed?
In this example, the QR code, I believe, will just stack. So I can do it where they each get their own port, or I can stack them. So here's, can you guys see this right? Yeah, you guys are seeing this. So I can take, or I can merge him, take him now full screen. Is that your house?
That's not what I'm sending. Nope. You should be
right.
seeing the phone looking straight at the laptop screen right now.
That's somebody else.
Somebody else has done it.
We're on YouTube, so
okay. Let me cut out of this. Well, that was fun.
Possibly,
no risk there.
Possibly one of the more dangerous things we've done without thinking through that. So anyway, we're glad that it was just a backyard. So okay, okay, all right, we're gonna move
Classic.
on. Next question.
Coming in from Serge Blondin in Sherbrooke. Anyone will compare AWS with Azure. Working for a Microsoft distributor, we are more into Azure, but I'm interested of the opinion of why AWS would be a better solution.
Go ahead, Leo.
So we just have to go back a little bit and look at this. Azure is Microsoft's attempt to move everybody in a corporate environment off their corporate infrastructure because they knew they were going to run out of problems. So most of us were using Exchange servers, and it was a really easy lift and shift to do that. And you had certain things like they were saying on premises and off premises and all these sort of things. AWS came from a different environment. They were trying to deliver from a website, starting from that was everything they were doing was online based. And they supported Linux. So Azure, if you want to start with going to something that's Linux based, that's Azure out of the window straight away. So you have that difference of the environments that you start with. With that exception, you can, if you're going to be a Windows box, you can run it on both. You can run it on both. As far as I'm aware, you can run everything that you want to on both. But if you want to start moving into things like moving into environments that need Linux, or you need to be pushing out to certain other web environments, you're going to find that Azure being a Windows-based infrastructure, and if any of you've got to log in to Azure and suddenly realize, oh, it's just taken over my Exchange logins, and you go, and you fall out of the back door.
Sorry, I got a little. Jim?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I've been doing AWS for over 10 years, so I'm a little partial. But I'd say breadth and depth. So the number of choices that you have for name your vertical, like databases or storage. There's just a lot more options for you on the AWS side. So that's that can be key.
Jeff?
For us, it was also like Jim. I've been doing this for over 10 years with AWS and working with them in some form. So it's familiarity to start out with. But we have clients that are 100% Microsoft houses. So we had to use Azure. And then just recently, we deployed a Sienna processing engine in the Google Cloud for a client that I can't say, but let's just say they were heavily invested in the Google Cloud. And so for them, it was something that we couldn't use anybody else. So we had to go to other platforms. I was not as comfortable with Google Cloud, but as I've got to deploying in it, I was amazed. It's got a lot of capabilities and a lot of hardware, and they're coming fast. None of these three majors are going to sit around. They're not going to say, oh, well, we've got it built. Let's just bring people. They're continually updating data centers. And what I've found for me in our deployments ourselves and also our clients, AWS just had a wider set of data centers and a wider set of hardware in place. So we could accelerate putting people into play right away and get them live right away, besides being familiar with it too. But it was just more hardware capabilities. We didn't run out of graphics machines. Our first foray into Azure problem there was they didn't have the hardware. They had the software, the right versions of software and all that, but they didn't have the hardware to back up the software and the needs that we had for video production, more video centric type stuff. So it's a balance of everything, really. There's no perfect answer.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say the tutorials are available on AWS are so much more widespread for the video production professional. When I first launched on Azure, it was nice because it was regular Windows instead of Windows Server. So AWS, they're all servers. You have to go over to Azure if you want a normal computer. You can do some AWS workspaces. I believe you can get regular Windows, or you can do what you call bring your own license, and you can look up some tutorials. But yeah, for video production, like especially the NDI workflow, popping open ports and being able to go from machine to machine is so much easier in the AWS world from just basically the people in the online community that have shared that information. I mean, there's tutorials even on the AWS site themselves. They've made a blog post, and I'll put that in the chat.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael. Rupert mentioned getting on invoice terms with AWS. Wouldn't it be safer to set spending limit per year and stick to it to guard against overdrawing your account or credit card horror stories? In other words, personal credit rating being affected.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
So I'm going to actually bring this back on the fact that in the Makana chat, when we answered a very similar question, it was people saying, well, this is about people learning. And absolutely, you are listening to some people who have gone past that learning environment and are now using it on a longer term basis. But when you are on the learning levels and there are free tiers, and there are a lot of things that you can do on the free tiers, and there's a lot of areas of learning and to build up and to do that. So what I don't want to do is that people sit there and think that there's a horror story that you're going to use AWS and it's going to literally wreck your credit rating in 5 seconds flat. It isn't, if you work on what you actually need to do, because you actually have to set the levels of the machines that you buy or the machines you try out. And if you try out on the baby machines where you're on something called a spot instance, and spot means that you literally, it's there while you're using it, but it could disappear on you. So it's not ideal for certain environments. You're basically using their spare capacity. You're not going to get caught, or you shouldn't. It's when you move up and you start saying, I need dedicated machines, or I'm going to buy reservations, and then I'm going to power and use those machines heavily, that you will potentially have those issues and you've got to monitor it.
Go ahead, Greg.
I mean, there seems to be a lot of questions about the billing, and this is not something I use, and so I don't want to give bad information, and maybe Jim or Jeff can kind of chime in here, but I do believe there is a mechanism inside AWS where you can set spending limits on your account. And so I believe that there is a mechanism inside AWS that'll send you a notification if you get to a certain level on your charges.
I think you can set the notifications. I don't think you can turn it off. So I think that what's there is that you can set it so that when you hit things, and I have that set up, so I get little pings if I'm spending money, that's how I know that I run it overnight. It's because I got a ping in the morning like, hey, you've been running all night, and you've now run up, but it's in like $15 warnings. It's because I don't use it. I mean, I use it as tests. The company uses it a lot more heavily, and it's not on my personal test account. But that for my personal stuff that I'm experimenting with, I have little very small increments that I'm warned about to make sure that I get ahead of it quickly. Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. What are the best practices for managing operating system patching across large fleets of AWS virtual machines?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yep. So Amazon has a wonderful service called AWS Systems Manager that works along with a number of other components that essentially allows you to manage your entire fleet, specify maintenance windows, automatically deploy those patches within the windows, provide audit and reporting and notifications in the event that instances aren't patched. So it is the bee's knees, as they say.
Next question.
Coming in from Carmi Vinesovic in Redondo Beach, California. Has anyone used AWS Cognito with the code flow from JavaScript front end without using the hosted UI?
I don't think anybody has. So it's a frontier. Oh, wait, Jim?
Carmi, not yet. It's on my list of things to do, though.
the ever-growing list of things to do. All right, next question. Oh, Leo, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, before we jump to the next question.
It's okay, because I came in late on this question. It's my fault. We have used it. We tried it, and we walked away from Cognito. So for information, Cognito is a single sign-on environment to enable you to link multiple things. That's how we were using it. We found a better solution for single sign-on that was more adaptable across other environments than just inside of AWS.
Let's jump. I'm going to move past this next question because it's just coming back to more billing. I think we've had enough billing questions for today. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. What is the most convenient way to connect a local machine to a remote AWS S3 storage?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Mountain Duck. I think I led George onto this a while back too, and I think he's used it. CyberDuck and Mountain Duck. You can actually it's like a FTP type of software. You see the folders, you see the drums. I mean, it's just a piece of cake. Love it.
George?
As Jeff just mentioned, using CyberDuck and Mountain Duck, it just mounts on your desktop locally every time you boot up. Same thing for the cloud. Chirag and Jonas has a script that they use, which might be a little more sophisticated. But for me, this has been working fine.
Greg?
George just said what I was going to say. What I was going to say is like Chirag and Jonas have a great script for that. So maybe reach out to them and they can hook you up.
Okay, well, we have sprinted through another second hour of AWS. And at the very beginning, again, my recommendation for producers is to get a little ahead of it. You guys seem to be able to just turn the burners on immediately when we say, "Hey, we don't have any questions." If you get ahead a little bit more, we'll move a little bit faster. So, but otherwise, great questions. You know, definitely moving the conversation forward and having it working. Great answers to the panelists. It's a lot of wide variety. And I think that what's interesting is that the only way we can field a wide variety of questions is with a large number of panelists. You know, a lot of times we used to limit it to, you know, in the old days of broadcast, we would limit it to 3 or 4 people. And it's just hard for 3 or 4 people to answer the question. When a slightly larger group, we get a wider net to capture some of those things. So it's really interesting. Anyway, thanks so much. Great work for everybody. And now we're going to jump into the after hours. Remember, tomorrow we'll talk about working with clients. All right. See you in a couple minutes.